And I'd like to welcome y'all once again to this month's Wildlife for Lunch webinar. Today's webinar is titled Pollinators and Native Plants Forever Intertwined. It's going to be presented by Ricky Lennox with USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. Today's webinar is made possible through funding provided by the San Antonio Livestock Exposition Incorporated, and it's hosted by the Texas Wildlife Association and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. Ricky, with that, you should have the controls here shortly, and you're good to go.
All right, Clint, thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're going to talk about the importance of pollinators, and we're going to tie it in with wildlife habitat management as well. Now, most of you, I'm sure, are familiar. Hopefully, there's several members in attendance. You're familiar with the logo of the Texas Wildlife Association, which I guess has been the logo for most of its years of existence. But I think today's presentation, you might need to be thinking about a different logo possibly, although I'm sure the old deer guys probably don't want to look at TWA with a monarch on its logo or a honeybee. But these pollinators are why we have the wildlife plants that are in the habitat that we're managing for habitat. Now, we've been taught since college and before about managing habitat. It's all about, making proper stocking rate for livestock, having a good handle on deer numbers, keeping your deer density in proportion to the amount of land that you can sustain. But as we get a lot of things happen in life, and as we go through and see things under a little bit brighter skies, you may realize that it's a little deeper than just managing habitat. We definitely have to manage for the plants themselves, and the pollinators are the plant managers. They are the ones responsible for pollinating flowers, producing seeds, so that we have a new crop of annual forbs, and those seeds can help replace the perennial forbs that eventually will die. All of these species utilize plants. We know that. That's not anything that you're not aware of. But what we also need to think about is what it takes to get those plants out there. And that's again, what I'm kind of harping on here is it's a little deeper than managing habitat. It's managing the plants themselves. And to manage them, we've got to have healthy pollinators. Now, this gentleman was quite the wordsmith, quite an orator. He was a senator from Kansas in the late 1870s. He wrote this in 1872, and he's talking about the Kansas blue stems, although he titled it In Praise of Bluegrass. But let me read that. Quite poetic here. Grass is the forgiveness of nature, her constant benediction. Fields trampled with battle, saturated with blood, torn with the ruts of cannon, go green again with grass, and carnage is forgotten. Streets abandoned by traffic become grass-grown, like rural lanes, and are obliterated. Forests decay, harvests perish, flowers vanish, but grass is immortal. It bears no blazonry or bloom to charm the senses with fragrance or splendor, but its homely hue is more enchanting than the lily or the rose. And this is the part that really caught my attention. This was written after the Civil War, so that's the references to the cannons. It yields no fruit in earth or air, and yet should its harvest fail for a single year, famine would depopulate the world. Now, in 1872, this might have been a little more truthful than it probably is today, because they didn't have international shipments of food. They couldn't, there were no Walmarts, or they had to shoot, grow, or catch whatever they ate or trade for it. So life was a little harder back then. And think about it, if we lost the grasses for 1 year, it could hurt things. Now, this photo I took north of Abilene in July of 2011, during that first year of the bad drought. And without nesting cover, most ground nesting birds would not survive. But look at that vegetation. There's a couple of green forbs in front of those quail, which are silverleaf nightshade plants, pretty small for midsummer. But that looks like a dead of winter shot. And if we didn't get any more growth after July of that year, and the cattle were still eating the existing dormant vegetation, Think how bad it could get for both livestock, humans, and wildlife. And I'll ask you, would you want to live in a world without quail? And thankfully, after the last couple of years, the quail numbers have begun to rebound with adequate rainfalls. Let's go back over 100 years ago, 1901, in this publication, The Life of the Bee. Remove the bee from the earth, and at the same stroke, you remove at least 100,000 plants that will not survive. So that's 100,000 plants that are not out there providing forage for wildlife, for livestock. It's not providing flowers for pollinators. If we go forward 100 years, we're still talking about the same thing. The way humanity manages or mismanages its nature-based assets, including pollinators, will in part define our collective future in the 21st century. And you're going to see this next sentence tweaked a little bit by different people, but they're all saying about the same thing, is that of the 100 crop species that provides 90% of the world's food, over 70 are pollinated by bees. And this little publication is available on the internet as a PDF, Bee Basics, an Introduction to Our Native Bees. And that sentence in the yellow right there is just one sentence out of some of the text of that book. What would our world be like without the beauty of flowering trees, shrubs, and wildflowers? And how many of us know that bees pollinate approximately 75% of the fruits, nuts, and vegetables grown in this country? But that quote in yellow really is like a blow to the head. That woke me up that, you know, there's more to this than just managing the habitat. This buck taken down in the hill country is a nice looking buck. If you look at the antlers, but look at the body. His ribs are showing, hips are pretty thin. As he's leaving, you can see the hip bones. So that would be the state of affairs for our wildlife if we were to lose our flowering shrubs, trees, and wildflowers. And would you want to live in a world without big game? Now, I'm going to show you three different diet studies from across Texas. This is one that was done in the North Texas area, the Cross Timbers and Prairies regions by Jim Dillard, west of the Fort Worth area. They broke out crops and feeds as available feed sources for deer as well. On the left, there's about 76% of the deer's diet in the cross timbers made up of browse, forbs, and hard mast. Grass only about 12%. This study in the Texas Hill Country by Parks and Wildlife, under a no-graze situation by livestock, noticed that the forbs in yellow amount to quite a bit of the diet of the deer. The browse picks up in the fall and winter when the forbs have kind of played out, and just a little bit of grass is eaten, less than 10%. Under heavy grazing, the forbs are also being eaten by cattle or sheep and goats, and so there's less forbs available. The deer have to eat more browse, and they have to try to eat a little bit more grass, although they can't digest grass as readily as they can a forb, so they have a harder time with it. So if we run out of grass, the livestock are going to switch off and start eating more of what the wildlife are using. And this is a study from South Texas, Southern Edwards Plateau. All you have to do here is subtract the grass off this chart. So in the spring, 86% of the deer's diet's forbs and browse, 93% in the summer, and it goes on. So, you know, there's plenty of studies out there that show the importance of flowering plants to wildlife. We just got to look a little deeper. This is sort of some interesting facts. 30,000 species of insects occur in Texas. More than 400 species of butterflies native to Texas. And there's been over 1,800 migrant butterfly sightings in Texas that are just passing through. Don't stay here year round. 4,000 species of bees in the United States. 46 species of bumblebees native to the U.S. And as big a state of Texas is, we only have 9 species of native bumblebees. Now that flower that little green bee is on, that's a green sweat bee. That's a Texas nightshade flower. My hand's on the left side, so you can see how tiny that flower is and how tiny that bee is as well. And this bumblebee on the right is on the mealy blue sage. And when you see it in this young lady's hand, you can tell how large it is. So the bees come in all sizes, small to large. Flowers also come in all sizes, and these bees are going to make use of everything they can. Now, read the text. Don't worry about the photos because I'm going to enlarge those, but look at the text. In Texas, this is a study done by the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service as a tech note, pollinator plants for Texas conservation practices. But pollination by bees and other species contributes an estimated $3 billion of fruits and vegetable production in Texas, $1.6 billion to $3.8 billion for agricultural crops in total. So think about these that benefit pollinators: sunflowers, tomatoes, berries, alfalfa, fruits, and vegetables. Now, if we look at this photo, is from Whole Foods. They got on the bandwagon with pollinators, and this is showing you your produce choices with bees. And it's going to transition now to looking like a third world country or a town that had a heavy snowstorm and everybody has raided the market. Now this is your produce choices without bees, without pollinators. If we go to the dairy aisle, now you can see your dairy choices with bees. And I guess we'll be eating less butter and more margarine in a world without pollinators. Here's a creek in central Texas, headwaters Lampasas River, about the 1st of April a few years ago. The grazing's pretty heavy. It's starting to green up. This is this year's grass beginning to grow, but how many wildflowers do you see? And we don't see many flowering shrubs. So pollinators would have a hard time if the world, or if Texas looked all like this. So we do have to still manage grazing. We need a diversity of wildflowers, different colors, different sizes, and we need those across at least the spring, summer, and fall of the year to be available for pollinators. And if you look at the different flowers, they all have different colors. That old big cobia penstemon on the upper left is a perfect little habitat for a big old bumblebee to come in there and buzz around in. A lot of different flowers visited by a lot of different insects and even hummingbirds and moths. So diversity is a key thing we're looking for. There's a lot of diverse species of pollinators, all these different bees, butterflies, moths, flies, bats in the desert country, desert southwest, are pollinators of cactus plants. But today, the monarch is getting all the attention. There's federal dollars being put toward conservation of monarch, planting of monarch pollinator plantings. She is the belle of the ball. And back in the 1950s, 1960s and early 70s, the big question was, where do the monarchs migrate to? Everyone knew they went south. They went south of Texas, but where did they migrate to in Mexico? And a husband and wife pair, I'll show you a picture of the wife here in a second. Basically, they were citizen scientists. They found, after a 2-year search in Mexico, there west of Mexico City, one of those mountains there, Cerro Pelon. They're on the south side of that series of mountains. That's where they found the monarchs roosting. And since then, all those little red triangles or other little mountaintops around 9,000 foot elevation where the monarchs also have been spotted. And Catalina Trail, this is one of her photos from back in the 70s, and that mountain in the middle there, that tallest peak, is Cerro Pelon, and this is where they would go climb up in the mountains, and finally they found the monarchs, their roosting spots. And in this photo, what the monarchs are actually roosting on is a stump of a large tree, fir tree, that was cut down for wood. Some of the smaller trees are still cut by the natives for firewood to heat their homes, cook their meals. So even though there is a preserve set up for the monarchs in that area, illegal lumber or illegal wood harvesting is still going on. So the citizen scientists were in contact with a college professor who came down. They notified him in January of '75. The next January, the professor came down. They toured this, brought National Geographic in, and this issue came out in August of '76. And we all know about the milkweed, but in this photo, this gentleman in the lower left, Lincoln Brower, still a professor at a college in the Northeast, Sweetbriar College. Back in the 50s, he was studying the monarchs, and they fed this tame blue jay a monarch, and within about 15 minutes, it made the blue jay sick, threw it up. So that's the response. This is a learned response that blue jay will never eat another monarch-looking butterfly again because it made him sick. Now, the milkweed is needed to lay eggs on, and the caterpillars eat the foliage, and the adult monarchs also nectar on the plants. So monarchs are critical. That's the only thing that the monarch lays its egg on is a milkweed plant. But we also need to think about pollinators in general needing flowering plants through the spring, summer, and fall months of the year. We have to have those. The more diverse you have, the better. And a couple of years ago, a real neat publication came out from Texas Parks and Wildlife in cooperation with one of the professors at Baylor, Identification of Milkweeds in Texas. You can Google this, download it as a PDF. It has all of the native 36 species of milkweeds and the one tropic milkweed introduced. If you're interested in milkweeds, you got to have that little publication. It's very good, very useful. Now, the monarchs, when they get ready to migrate in the spring, Mother Nature tells them where to go and when to go. They move up into Texas, start looking for milkweeds, lay their eggs on. The eggs hatch, go through several stages as a caterpillar turns into a chrysalis that hangs there, and then the adult emerges. That process from egg to the emergence of the adults about 5 weeks. Now the monarchs that were overwintering in Mexico came up and ate the milkweed, laid the eggs, they die. Those eggs hatch out. Those caterpillars then turn into the adults that fly on up into Arkansas, Kentucky. They lay eggs again. 5 weeks later, those adults move on. That second generation has died now. And then they move on up into the Midwest. About 4 generations of monarchs are produced. And they live through the summer up in this Midwestern states around the Great Lakes. And this has become a critical issue because the plant that they really utilize up there is a milkweed species that we don't have in Texas, but it's very common. The dark green areas are counties that have common milkweed. And that is their host plant when they're up there in the Midwest, in the Great Lakes, Mississippi Valley area. But the problem is that's also the area of the United States where soybeans are planted. And prior to chemical tolerant soybean seeds being available, this common milkweed is a rhizomatous perennial native milkweed that was tolerant of being plowed. If they tried to spray the milkweed to kill it, it would also kill the crops. But with Roundup Ready soybeans, corn, cotton plants, now the milkweed is really almost wiped out. If you look at that box on that graph on the top, look at the green bars. That's the acres in that time period back between 1996 and 2002. You see that the millions of acres planted stays about stable, about 71, 73 million acres. But look at the blue bars, which is the increase in the amount of Roundup Ready soybean acres. And the chart on the lower right shows that now, if we go up through 2016, probably 90% of all soybeans are herbicide tolerant. That's the HT initials. And look at the corn and the cotton. It's all, most of the seeds now that are being planted are Roundup Ready seeds. If you look on the lower right, the numbers are a little small, but that decline in monarchs can be sort of traced to the increase in the amount of Roundup Ready crops. That's something that's being worked on at all levels, universities, governments. It's being monitored, and we've got to find something that can grow up in that Midwest to keep the monarchs healthy in their stay up in that time period. So here is a Journey North website that shows the fall peak of the monarchs just before. These are all tagged monarchs before they have started their southern migration. They're right up there where the soybeans are. And now, as they come south, heading back, this is that fourth generation of monarchs. And that generation will fly all the way back down to Mexico, somewhere it's never been before. It's just genetically programmed to get there. And they will overwinter and then come back to Texas in the spring looking for milkweed. So that's the generations that hatch out in Texas live for about 5 weeks. And then the last generation lives about 9 months. Here's a caterpillar. Now, we talked about the blue jays not wanting to eat a caterpillar or a adult monarch because of that coloration. They recognize that. So another insect, another butterfly called a queen, sort of mimics that. Yellow, striping, black, but you can tell them because of the number of antennas. The monarch has 2 pair of antenna, while the queen has a 3rd pair in the middle of its body. And even in adults, the queen is mimicking very closely the look of the monarch, although it's a little redder, not quite as orange. And here's again, on the left is a monarch caterpillar last fall in October in Throckmorton County eating broadleaf milkweed. And on the right is a queen butterfly several years ago on rough stem rosinweed. Now, we've got other bees, Carpenter bees, and these are the wood-boring bees. There's also ground nesting bees. This is not a bumblebee. At first you might think it is, but the bumblebee on the left will have hairs all over its body, the head, thorax, the abdomen, the lower part of the body. If you look on the carpenter bee, you see it shines. There's a lot of reflection, and that's where there's not a lot of hair. So that's the way you can tell at a quick glance whether that's a bumblebee or one of the carpenter bees. Carpenter bees can be important pollinators on big open-faced flowers, but they're also nectar robbers on smaller flowers. And by that, look at this blue wild indigo, and if you look at where those yellow circles are, what's happened there, this carpenter bee has poked a hole in the base of that flower, stuck the proboscis in, sucked the nectar out, and bypassed the pollen. So he's not contributing to pollination, but he is using the nectar. So he's kind of a nectar robber. But he's still, on a big flower, he will go in and there will be pollination from big flowers. Life is not always easy for pollinators. Besides, things like drought and just all kinds of hardships, they've got to avoid predation by other insects. Here's I believe this is a Virginian tiger moth. I took this photo in Bell County, north of Temple, in October of last year. Very late in the year, but you see the Maximilian is flowering, so that's about the time of the year it was. But what also happened, a honeybee came and landed on that flower, and so we've got a little bit of competition. There's always competition between animals, plants, and insects for food. One animal can outcompete another animal for food. One plant grows, shades another plant, less light for that plant, so it outcompetes that plant. One animal grazes one plant, ignores another plant, which might give that other plant, the ignored plant, a little chance to grow a little more. One flower is pollinated, another one might be missed and not pollinated. And that's the way nature is. But if we can maintain diversity on the land, it benefits all species. Now, one thing I wish I had done while I was taking these photos in this restored prairie, I wish I had watched to see if that caterpillar was going to finish eating the ray petals, which is all it was eating, and start eating on those disc flowers that are in the center where the nectar is. It would have been interesting, but I didn't didn't get to stick around. Now, as the monarchs are going back south, they're going to all funnel through Texas. And so Texas is receiving a lot of federal dollars for conservation planting of, well, some planting, but mostly management of the flowers, the wildscapes that we have. Let me go back one here. I hit a button too quick. As the monarchs head south, they still need flowers to find the nectar, and they need water, because every living organism's got to have water. But the roadblocks that these monarchs face, and if you look at this image from 2011, when we were in that such bad drought, there weren't a lot of flowering plants in 2011 in the fall when they were trying to find their way back south. So these roadblocks include drought, which is something we can't control, but we can do something about overgrazing. Late summer burns, which don't allow the plants to recover and produce flowers that year, can be a roadblock, but we don't have a lot of summer burning going on, whether wildfire or prescribed burning in the summer, but that can be a little roadblock. And then summer weed sprays that might knock down the flowers. That's certainly a roadblock. But we all need a diversity of fall flowering plants, especially fall for the monarch, but flowering all through the 3 growing seasons as well. And again, the way they measure the monarch habitat, or the number of monarchs, is not by counting them, but by counting the acres that they are grouped in, hanging on the trees. And the high point, since they started measuring, was back in '96. There was 45 acres of monarchs. And you see the low point was 2013 through 2014, just 1.66 acres. And this past year, 7.2 acres of monarchs. So it goes up and down. Cold winter freak storms that can hit those mountains in Mexico can, kill monarchs hanging on the trees. They're just sort of semi-hibernating, low energy use. But this chart also reminds me of the decline of most bird species in Texas, especially bobwhite quail, except for the last year, which has picked up and spiked record highs for bobwhites. Now let's look at some of the beneficial plants for pollinators. Some of these are readily available that you can buy the seed for. Some you'll have to harvest yourself, but there is no better seed to plant in the ground than a seed that came 1 or 2 miles away from your property. That's the most adapted seed to the soils, the climate, the location, elevation that you are. So hand harvesting is a great choice. You can also buy some of these seeds. You just have to search around and find someone that's handling a lot of wildflower seeds. The USDA plant material centers, which we have 3 in Texas, one in Knox City, one in Nacogdoches, and one in Corpus. They are growing some of these plants. Pollinator plants are the in thing right now because of the monarch and the colony collapse disorder, things like that. They're hitting the bees. So we're needing to get more of these plants, but we're behind the curve because the monarch situation hits so fast that the growers have got to grow these plants. Well, first they've got to be collected, evaluated, the best of these varieties released for growers. The growers have to grow enough to sell. So it's a several-year project. But hopefully if you can hand harvest some of these from nearby prairies, nearby bar ditch, relic areas, then you'll get a jump on everyone else. So Rattlesnake Master is an excellent plant. It is it's actually in the yucca family. These leaves are very sort of yucca-like. Here is a dried flower in the fall on the left. The flower on the feed sac is a green, just becoming ripe enough to be nectared upon. And that little map that you see with the green counties, that is from the plants database, showing the counties that this plant has been documented to occur in. Not to say that there's not additional counties in East Texas. Those counties that are not green, it's probably there. It's just no one has documented it in those counties. No herbarium has it in their collection, that sort of thing. But this state map here will kind of give you an idea of where this plant is native to and where it will grow if you're trying to plant it. If you're trying to grow it in El Paso, it's going to have extra water probably for it to grow. But through the middle half, eastern half of the state, I think it would probably do well. It's the furthest west you see there is Fredericksburg, and then San Antonio right below it. But so it can get into the hill country. Now here's an American bumblebee foraging on an American basket flower. So I'll give you the American flag to make it a trifecta. And you see that a basket flower is very common across nearly all 10 vegetational regions of the state of Texas. Blooms May through June, so it's an early plant, late spring, very early summer flowering plant. Here's a close-up of the flower. Each one of those little frilly lavender tabs is actually a flower, so there's a lot of nectar to be had there. And this is a disturbed area that the seeds were already there. They just came up following the pipeline going in. So that's a native annual forb that's come up. Here it is on a different location, but about 2 months later, and all of those flowers have matured, and now it's made a tremendous amount of seed. Each one of those seed heads can probably produce 50 to 70 seeds. So it's going to reseed itself. It may have to have another disturbance to get that really thick stand up in the following years, but it's a very desirable plant. The last 2 years, it has been commercially available from some of the native seed dealers. Another very nice plant, both as a wildflower and as a pollinator plant, is purple coneflower. And you see it's very common in the northern part of the state and a little bit into the hill country, southern Blackland Prairie, and over into Louisiana. It's growing there as well. So I would think it could probably grow in the piney woods. There's actually a narrow leaf coneflower that does grow over in the post oak savanna piney woods area of the state. Another June flowering plant. So again, we're hitting the early summer plants. Here's rock daisy, also called Plains Blackfoot daisy. Native, flowers all summer, from spring through fall. It's going to be flowering any month of the year, from say April through November. Deer will browse on it a little bit, but there's enough of it out in most prairies, most pastures, that it will be producing flowers for pollinators every month of the year. And you can see in this about the western 2/3 of the state is where it's commonly found. Snow on the mountain, or if you're east of Interstate 35, snow on the prairie is another native annual wildflower that, even though those flowers are small, actually what you're looking at are bracts. It look like flower petals, but it's still visited by a lot of pollinator plants. And so it kind of picks up in the hot heat of summer and goes through early fall with the flowers. Excellent plant. You can hand harvest it. Now this one, some of you that farm may recognize it as a weed. And I'll have to admit, it probably should be a weed because it's very weedy in its growth. But from a pollinator standpoint, that's excellent. Golden crownbeard, also called cowpen daisy. You can see it kind of grows everywhere in Texas. In fact, in the rolling plains, part of the panhandle, from Abilene north to Vernon, up in there, it's more common than it actually shows on the map. There's more counties that have it. So what's also good is that it blooms early, and it blooms through the summer, and blooms late. Now these photos were taken in different years, but the one on the left, mid-July, flowering. The one on the right, mid-October, still flowering. So that's what we need, something that's going to be available for a long period of time and even overlaps into the fall period when the monarchs are migrating through. Leavenworth Oringo. There are several Oringos in Texas. This is probably the most common one. It's not a thistle, but it is in a different family and under the genus Oringo. Now, you see through the middle part of the state is where it's common, and that's also the middle part of the flyway of the monarch. And it will bloom July, August, some years into September. But it's definitely a summer flowering plant. Honeybees especially like to find the nectar in this plant. So if you're a beekeeper, this is one that you'd hope to have and have a lot of around your hives. Now, Maximilian Sunflower has been available for 30 years or more as a commercially available seed for wildlife use, planting it for deer forage, planting it for seeds for songbirds, game birds. You can kind of see by where it's greened out on the maps, it's going to grow pretty well, except for the far east and the far western part of the state. Very underrated wildflower for pollinators because it flowers in the fall when the monarchs are here. You know, it's not going to be a sunflower that produces a flower in the middle of summer like annual sunflower does. This is a native perennial sunflower that will come back every year. The colony will kind of grow, gets larger, spreads by rhizomes, and that flower in the fall when the monarchs are coming through. This photo was taken in October last year in Throckmorton County. About a half-acre patch of native Maximilian sunflower on this ranch, and the monarchs were hanging on every petal. Now, my camera lens does not automatic focus anymore. I have to manually focus and snap a lot of pictures, hoping one of them, I'm machine gunning the pictures is what I'm doing, to try to get a good image, sharp. The wind was blowing that day about 20 miles an hour, and so not all of these are going to be sharp because you know those stems were certainly waving, but that image turned out pretty good. And about a quarter mile north of where that photo was taken, the monarchs the next morning were hanging in this hackberry on the banks of Lamb's Head Creek. So they were resting in October on their way south. In fact, they may have stayed an extra day because the winds all day the previous day when I took the pictures of the Maximilian was blowing about 20 miles an hour out of the south. So they wouldn't have made much headway trying to leave that day. Another weedy type plant that likes to grow under live oaks, wherever live oaks grow, or under other trees, but especially it seems like under live oaks, is frostweed. And it's a fall flowering plant, beautiful white flowers. You can buy the seeds of this, small amounts of seed. It's probably not, it would be hard to buy enough to plant 10 acres in a mix, but you could certainly plant it in a backyard planting. One of the unique traits about this plant, there is a lot of sap in the stems, and at first frost, the sap freezes and splits the stem, and it is exuded out in ribbons of frost. And if there's enough sap remaining, the second night that you get a freeze the next morning, it'll do this again, maybe as many as 3 times before the plant sort of dries up. But that's a unique adaptation. You got to get out early on a frosty morning to get that photo. The gay feathers, Liatris, another wonderful plant for fall use because of when it's flowering. It flowers about hunting season, so September, October, into November. And there's probably 5 to 7 different species of gay feather in Texas. And this map is a compiled map of all species of gay feather. So you can see it. There's a species of gay feather that's going to be growing just about anywhere you are in the state. Deer will forage on this plant. You see a couple of stems there bitten off, but all in all, that's not a bad thing. If it happens early enough in the year, the plant will just send up new growth, send up 2 or 3 new stems where that one was bitten off. It has to happen early in the year for these stems to be able to make flowers. If not, they'll just make flowers the following year on those stems that was a single stem and is now 3 stems. And this is what it looks like in the fall. You've seen this plant around. You can hand harvest the seed after it dries and turns kind of a golden tan color and spread those around. This photo was taken several years ago on the last Friday of September, and I know the date because this is taken on the Rolling Plains Quail Research Ranch west of Roby, Texas, in the rolling plains of North Texas. And these were monarchs heading south late September, and they were stopping to fill up their gas tanks. They were nectaring on dotted gayfeather. There's also on the far left a monarch hanging with them, also looking for something to eat. I mean, a queen butterfly on the far left hanging with the monarchs. Now, this is sort of an interesting photo. This was a narrow-leaf gayfeather, which is Central Texas, eastward. The previous photo I showed you on the quail ranch was one of dotted gayfeather, and you can tell them apart because the narrow-leaf gayfeather has a carrot-shaped root, long tapered root, while the dotted gayfeather has an onion-shaped root, squatty onion-like root, actually called a corm. And if you cut into it, it will be a maroonish black color. Quite a bit of root exposed on these two plants right here of narrow-leaf gayfeather that you can see, but they appear to be very healthy. So what's going on with that? Back in the 1960s, Phillips 66 Petroleum published a book called Pasture and Range Plants, and in the front cover, they had several species of plants showing the root system in drawings. And you can see in this drawing, the roots of gayfeather can go down to 16 feet. So even though it looks like well over half of that root is exposed, there's still enough root in the soil of this cut bank of this ranch road to keep that plant healthy. Kind of interesting. Now, this is one that's a western third of the state of Texas, although we're finding it even as far east as Young County, Graham, and down in Granbury. So it's a little more east than what this map shows, but this is narrow-leaf globe mallow. And we've collected seed of this plant and sent it to the Plant Material Center at Knox City. And Dr. Gary Ray, who was the former manager, retired now of the center, he said the first year it came up, it started flowering, and it flowered from spring through fall. And he said every time he walked by and looked at it, there would be pollinators, bugs, beetles, butterflies, moths of some sort on this plant all summer long. So it has a tremendous number of flowers as well. Look at all the buds that have not opened, and look at the flowers that are open. So there's an excellent pollinator plant that is not commercially available at this time, but it's being tested, and a release hopefully will be coming from the Plant Material Center soon on this. Notice it has different colors. This photo was taken in the Panhandle of Texas, kind of a coral flower. Here's one with a pinkish flower, same plant. Don't know if the flowers are different soil related or just what, and it's not a maturity. These flowers will stay that color as they mature. They don't change or get darker as they mature. Here's another one that I think deserves a little attention, rough stem rosinweed. And where I see this one mostly is in sandier country. So if you think about just east of the Blackland Prairie, the Post Oak Savanna, it's very common in that area. I have seen it northwest of Fort Worth, so it will grow in a little tighter soil, but it's a midsummer, June to August flowering perennial. This is a Silphium, related to, in the same family actually, as compass plant. So if you read a Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold, he wrote a chapter on the compass plant and how deep the roots were. This is a cousin to it, and it will be another very desirable plant in the summertime. Although in the photo on the left, there's quite a few other plants in flower, but in some years we don't get a lot of pollinator plants available in midsummer due to hot, dry weather. But this one's going to be good. So I would certainly encourage you to look for this one and hand harvest seed of it. Here's another one that has already gone through the process of being tested at a plant material center at the East Texas Plant Material Center in Nacogdoches. It's even been released as a joint release between the East Texas Plant Material Center and the Golden Meadow Plant Material Center in Louisiana. The seed is out there waiting on the seed breeders to buy, or to actually not buy, they'll be given the seed and for them to start growing it and make it commercially available. So ashy sunflower is available. It's another perennial native sunflower that should be used. And again, it's blooming from summer through fall. So excellent plant. I have seen it in a couple of counties in north central Texas, but it's certainly not common. This is probably the most unusual plant that we've been working with lately, willow leaf sunflower. And if you look at the map there, it's only found or known in 5 counties in Texas. But if you look at that red star, that is Knox County, Knox City. And these red scalded cedar-covered hills lie northwest of Knox City. And this plant was found blooming in August a few years ago. Look at that old soil it's growing. It's some pretty hot, inhospitable conditions that it's growing in right there. But it's healthy, flowering. We drove on down off this hill and got down in the bottom about 200 yards away from where that previous photo was, and it's growing on the bottom in that heavy clay, mangum clay soil. So it's a tough plant. Also, if you look at the other red star there, that's Cook County, one of the 5 counties that it was known to occur in. It has been found there on the native prairies that have never been plowed. These are shallow soils, about 5 to 6 inches of topsoil and fractured rock underneath. So that's why they were never broken out. So it is found there, and we're collecting seed of it for the Plant Material Center, and hopefully we'll have it undergoing test within either this year or perhaps the next year. And this bumblebee buzzed in. I was taking a photo of the beetle there on that flower, and this bumblebee buzzed in and kind of butted in and pushed the beetle over to the side. So there are 2 different pollinators there having to share that flower. And it gets the name willow leaf because of the long, thin leaves that are on the lower third of the plant. This will get about 5 or 6 feet in height, about 5 feet average. And not to forget about our flowering shrubs. Buttonbush, again, common across all of Texas, any riparian area or anywhere where there's water shallow to the surface, you could have buttonbush plants growing. And it's a June through July flowering plant. Look at the large white flower balls, many nectar sources there, many flowers visited by a wide variety of pollinating plants. And again, different species of pollinators. Now, looking back, you get it? Looking back, I hope we never come to a time when we are bemoaning the fact that we don't have white-tailed deer anymore, or we don't have bobwhite quail, or any other wildlife, songbird, non-game species that we have now. As long as we can keep the pollinators who will keep the plants, the flowering shrubs, trees, and wildflowers healthy, then we should have our wildlife into the future. Now this slide right here is very telling. Look at the fruits, vegetables, and field crops that pollinators are responsible for us having. If we were to lose those, it's a big loss in our diet. Now look at this quote. This sort of sums up this whole presentation, why we need to be mindful of the pollinators. Not a single bee has ever sent you an invoice, and that is part of the problem, because most of what comes to us from nature is free. Because it is not invoiced, because it is not priced, because it is not traded in markets, we tend to ignore it. And that's certainly what's happened with a lot of our pollinator species, why they're in a declining stage right now. So I want to leave you with some words of caution. The bees will talk to you if you listen. So here is the words of caution. The pollinators are telling you, when we go, we're taking you with us. This was actually a photo I found on the internet of a wall that had been painted up, but they get the message. You know, whoever did the artwork gets the message. And so with that, Clint, if we have any questions, we'll try to answer them.
All right. Thank you, Ricky. So far, they're letting you off easy. We have one question for you, but we still do have some time. I would encourage anybody, if you have questions, to post them up in the chat window, and we will get to them in order they come in. So let me get back to it. The first question, will the USDA grant have seeds available for milkweed and top flowering plants?
Well, in the states north of us, Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, the federal cost share that's planned for those areas is largely going to be about helping manage for pollinators, manage the milkweed. So in effect, it may turn into a payment for grazing management, such as deferred grazing. The states up in the soybean country, those states will get cost share for planting specifically milkweeds. Now in Texas, we can do pollinator plantings. There's several programs. There's a conservation reserve program. There's environmental quality incentive program, EQIP dollars, that you can do a pollinator planting. But we're planting a diverse mix, as many forbs as we can get, along with some grasses to stabilize the soil. The bees and butterflies like to hang on the grasses as well, so we need some grasses. It also helps to make the mix a little more economical, because these wildflower plantings can be expensive, $150, $200 an acre. So we won't target specifically milkweeds in Texas, but we can plant a little bit of milkweed in combination with other, a more diverse forb mix.
Okay. We had a question come in real quick about whether or not you could do the first couple slides over again, and I'm going to use that as a segue and just mention, let me get back to the chat window here, mention that we will have all these, or this PowerPoint, this presentation recorded, and if you go to the chat window, the link should be up there. Give me a week or so to get this presentation up, but you'll be able to see this and all the other presentations that we've done. They'll be available to go back and watch. Let me grab this other link here. I will also post up the link for future presentations and a place that you can go to see what all we have and what all is out there.
Can you take it back to the start? Because I think the only way I can do it here is to go through every slide.
Yeah, let me take it back.
Well, no, well, let's see. I can do that here. I remember you telling me there. Okay. So that's the first slide where they're wanting to look at the, they're wanting to see your logo, I think is what they're wanting. Another question about that? I thought I saw a question real quick flash up about, is there another name for gay feather to look on the plants database? And the way the plants database defaults is to search. When you type in the name on that left-hand side, it's searching under scientific name. So Liatris, L-I-A-T-R-I-S, I believe, is the genus for gay feather. You can click the drop-down where the scientific name is written and change that to common name, but it's a gamble as to whether or not gay feather will probably show up. But if you type in a common name of some of the other plants, if it was not loaded into the plants database as a accepted common name, it will not recognize it. You'll get an error message. So you might try typing in Liatris.
Okay, Ricky, can you explain what forbs are? Somebody missed that.
Okay, the forb is just a fancy name biologists call a weed. It sounds better than saying you got some nice weeds growing here. You got perennial weeds. Well, you got perennial forbs, so that's all it is. It's a broadleaf weed, but it's usually considered a beneficial plant, so that's why we call them forbs.
Okay. This question is, how do you collect your plant data for where the plants are located? This person lives in Midland County, which seems too big. Let's see. Yeah, I guess just how do you collect that data?
Well, the plants database gets information from every state has a flora of their state, and they will search that, and it shows counties that plant has been found in. Another avenue is they can actually query the different herbariums in Texas. All the universities have herbariums. Botanical Research Institute of Texas here in Fort Worth has got a huge herbarium, and they will just ask them, you know, do you have this plant? If so, what counties do you show this plant in? And most of the herbariums have their databases where that can be searched, and then they'll send that information to the plant's database, and they'll update those counties. Another way, if you've got a plant in that county and it doesn't show green, is you can actually email the plant's database. There's a contact us tab down there, and you can fill in the blanks of where it was found, when it was found, include photos, who also can verify this. And it takes a few years because they're overloaded with work. They're still trying to get plants loaded into the database, but it can be updated by individuals.
Okay. I follow along with this question. You mentioned on the Willow sunflower that they were being collected before testing and naming. Can you elaborate on what they were being tested for and the naming of that?
Okay. The willow leaf sunflower is an example. Since it's very restricted in where it's found, we're trying to gain access to private land working with landowners, ranchers that still have this plant on their property, and gather seeds in the fall when it's ripe. It's also found on some roadsides. And then, like if there was that collection from Knox City on that one ranch, it's kept separate from the other collections. And then anywhere else it's collected, it's a separate collection. And then it will, when they get enough collections, and I don't know if 10 is enough or sometimes 20 or 30, then they will start putting some of that seed in the ground, a little small, maybe an 8-foot row of that seed. And they evaluate those 10 collections that were sent in. And they'll watch them for several years. And over time, there'll be 1 or 2 or 3 of those 10, maybe as many as 5, that are superior. They're just more leafy. Or now what we'd be looking for is which ones produce the most flowers. And then those, say there's 4 out of the 10 that were determined to be the best flower producers. They will take the seeds they collect off those, they harvest those seeds out of the plots, and they will then expand, maybe do a 200-foot long planting of those seeds. And they'll evaluate them a few more years. And then eventually there's going to be one plant that will be rated the best. And then that one will be given a name, such as if the Knox City collection turned out to be the best, it could say Knox City narrowleaf, sunflower, willow leaf sunflower. Or they'll give it some other name. Sometimes it's a nearby creek. Not often is it a person's name or a ranch name, but it's given a name so that when the growers grow it and have it for sale, you can be sure you're getting that particular seed. Some of these can be fast-tracked and maybe done in 5 years, but most of the time, some of these have taken 20 years to get through all of the sampling.
Okay. You mentioned deer feeding on a couple plants. Are there any plants that are deer resistant or something that deer would not prefer that can be planted?
Well, there are some lists available. I believe Parks and Wildlife has a list. I believe Texas AgriLife Extension has a list that you can just search deer-resistant wildflowers, deer-resistant plants in Texas. And I would look for that. There are some that are not readily eaten by deer, but I don't have a list myself made up, but we try to find plants that deer will eat more so than plants they won't eat. So that's what the Plant Material Center is all about. When it first started in the 50s, it was about what grasses are really healthy and leafy and can produce a lot of forage for livestock, cattle. Then in the 70s and 80s, it became what are plants really good for wildlife. We need the deer foods, the flowers, the seeds that are eaten by game birds. And now pollinators are what's really important, and that's what they're looking at for new plants to be released. They'll be pollinator plants.
Okay. when you mention Roundup Ready seeds, is it the seeds that kill the milkweed or the butterfly, or how does that work?
Well, they're actually putting, it's like they're changing the genetic makeup of the seed and adding, this is getting into the DNA, and I'm a little green on this part, but they're actually changing the plant itself so that the bugs will not eat those plants. And then you can spray Roundup over the top of the soybeans, and it will not hurt the soybean, I guess is what I should say, but it will still kill those weeds, those forbs that are out there. There's a lot on the internet about Roundup Ready crops, so if you're interested in that, I would just do some searches. A lot of information out there, pros and cons about it.
Okay. Is the local NRCS the best place to start for help in identifying areas of your property for creating areas for pollinators?
Well, I would think that's a very good start. Every county in the state and in the nation is represented by a Natural Resources Conservation Service office. Our services are free. You've already paid for them in taxes. We can make an appointment. You can come in or call and make an appointment. We'll come out on the ground with you, look at the property, evaluate what's there, show you what you've got already, what forbs are already there and beneficial, and then locate some of the soils that would be conducive to putting in a forb planting. Texas Parks and Wildlife also has biologists that can evaluate this land very similar. Some of the county agents with Texas AgriLife Extension can do the same thing. Maybe Texas Forest Service, if you're in the wooded areas, can tell you where the trees, the bit more beneficial trees are. There are people out there, and NRCS, Parks and Wildlife, AgriLife are in nearly every county, so I would say start there, and it doesn't hurt to get a different opinion from a different agency.
Okay, can you transplant native milkweed?
It's difficult to because it has a very deep taproot. If the plants are young, they're more easily transplanted, and I guess you'd have to grow a few to know what a young one looks like, but you're going to need to dig deep, and hopefully you're not in hard ground or rocky ground. So the roots may go almost the depth of a sharpshooter, which is 16 inches, so it's not going to be an easy transplant. Those seeds that are produced in the antelope horn milkweed pods, kind of interesting fact on that, when those pods open up, there's probably 50 to 80 seeds, and they've got a feather-like hair on the tail of them that helps them blow away by the wind. Each time you open up one of those pods and flutter those seeds away, you probably threw away $30 because those seeds are selling at 60 cents a seed right now. A pack of 10, $6. So your best bet might be to harvest the seed and then plant that. Plant it locally. Don't go 200 miles away to get the seed. Get the seed from your county and in your square mile if you can.
Okay, and on that note, are cultivars as good as native plants for pollinators?
Well, the cultivars like Maximilian Sunflower that you can buy commercially, that is a cultivar. Big Earl, Big Blue Stem is a cultivar. It is just a native that has been selected for certain traits, leafiness, flowers, or whatever. So it is as good or maybe even better than the natives because, again, the Maximilian Sunflower seed that we can buy now, there was probably 50 to 100 different collections tested, and this one that is available was the cream of the crop, the best. So, and it's usually these are going to be widely, they can go and be planted all across Texas, but if you're hand harvesting seed, that's the best seed to buy. If you're just buying native seed that's not a cultivar, then I would still suggest you try to get that seed as local as you can, as close to where you're planting it.
To your knowledge, is there any work being done with home builders or developers to encourage preservation of native habitat, such as large acreage?
It's a struggle. Some of the builders will try to incorporate this. Most of them are about, trying to get as many houses on a lot or on a plot as they can. So it's going to take a change in thinking to preserve some of this wild areas. Some do and some don't, so it's a little bit hard to say. Most of the time, the landowners don't get involved until they buy the house and it's already platted up, and there's not a lot you can do with it then.
Okay. 4 species mentioned in a question that asked if you could talk about them a little bit: Illinois bundleflower, bush sunflower, Engelmann daisy, and Maximilian sunflower.
Well, those, we often call them the big 4 of perennial forbs in Texas. They're all native, they're all perennial, highly beneficial to wildlife, deer, quail, turkeys. They all have a flower that will benefit pollinators. Illinois bundleflower will grow just about anywhere. Bush sunflower likes to be in the shallow, rocky areas, so it's not going to be as prolific in a bottomland, blackland clay as it will up on a side slope that's rocky and shallow. So where it's most commonly found would be in the hill country, cross timbers, somewhat in the rolling plains. Maximilian sunflower grows wide and far. I like it a lot, especially for the monarchs. And then Engelmann daisy is a early spring flowering plant, but the seed's fairly expensive, so it's hard to put it in a mix. 10% of a mixture that has Engelmann daisy will cost as much as the other 90% seeds that you plant. So we often don't put very much of it, maybe 1 or 2% of it in a mix. But it is a perennial forb that provides a lot of good early spring grazing for deer.
Okay, and I think the last question we just had one. I think the last question we have, can you speak some to the broad-scale use of herbicides and pesticides that we see now and how that may be impacting, directly impacting pollinators?
Well, if it's reducing the amount of, or the diversity of plants, flowering plants out there, that's a big negative. I'm not really up on if the insects are there and they get sprayed over by insecticide, it's not going to be good. But if they're sprayed over by herbicide trying to kill a plant, I don't know if that affects the insects. I'm not versed on that very well. But spraying the plants is going to have to happen. We're going to have to control some pests to grow a plant. But what goes on after that? We've got to have food. We've got to have clothing. So we're going to have to put up with some of the sprayings.
Alrighty. Looks like that's all the questions that we have. One more thing on my end is that if you're still around, please take your time to fill out the ending survey. At the end of the webinar, you'll be entered into a drawing for a Yeti cooler and a dove hunt for 2 in Hondo next year. Be for the 2018 season, so we can get through all 12 webinars this year. And also, our next webinar is going to be on April 20th. It's going to be on pronghorn restoration in the Trans-Pecos. It's going to be presented by both Dr. Whitney Gann with Borderlands Research Institute, and Sean Gray with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. So follow the same link, texas-wildlife.webex.com, same place that got you to where you are today, and we'll have a webinar on pronghorn. So, Ricky, unless you have anything else, I think we're good.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Thanks a lot.